You are listening to the Northern Miner Podcast, and I'm your host, Matthew Keevil. We are essentially the original global mining podcast, I believe, and this is indeed our 52nd episode. So that's right, we are celebrating our 1-year anniversary, roughly, and oh my, how time does fly. I'd first and foremost like to thank our listeners and audience. You guys have grown by leaps and bounds over the past year, and the thing that probably gets me the most excited is how we've sort of bridged a generational and geographic gap here in our little corner of cyberspace. We have everyone from mining students across Canada, be it at SFU, Queens, I've heard from people as far over as Dalhousie tuning in, right up to some of Canada's most experienced mining executives. Our listeners geographically range from here in Canada and the US all the way across the Atlantic to places like the United Kingdom and Scandinavia. We have a lot of listeners in Finland, so hi Finland. We've also seen our listenership grow in emerging jurisdictions in Africa and across the South Pacific. So thank you everyone. Thanks for being so interactive. Thanks for providing great suggestions and directions for the program. I think the most important thing we do here is promote the discussion on mining globally, and we have a great time while we're doing it, because that's what Lesley and I like to do, which is have fun. But thanks again, and this week we do have a great episode. Linking back a little bit to my point on education, we have an awesome Geology Corner guest this week. Craig Hart will be joining us. Craig is the director of the University of British Columbia's Mineral Deposit Research Unit, maybe more well known as the MDRU, because it is a cool acronym. We bring Craig and Lesley and myself, and we'll discuss the an industry and government-funded Yukon-Alaska project. Now, this involves data compilations that will range as far south as the Yukon-BC border and as far west as the Fairbanks district in Alaska. So needless to say, we will dig into Goldcorp's recently acquired coffee deposit with Craig, as well as the discovery potential that remains in the Yukon's White Gold District. And importantly, we've seen a lot of majors making significant capital investments in exploration in the district recently. We have Goldcorp, obviously, and not only its purchase of Kaminak, but also its investment in Independence Gold, which controls the contiguous Boulevard Gold project. We also saw Agnico Eagle invest $14.5 million in Sean Ryan's new white gold vehicle. So Craig will dig into sort of a little insight on the deposit types up there. We'll talk a little bit about orogenics, about intrusive gold, and he'll also take us on a little geological trip across the border into Alaska. And then later in the show, I also have a few comments from an interview I did with Leagold Mining CEO Neil Woodyer. Now, the company is in the process of purchasing the Los Filos gold mine in Mexico from Goldcorp. And anyone familiar with the Endeavour mining story in West Africa will probably know Neil's name and his team. So they've decided to take their sort of intermediate gold production model. They built up Endeavour mining through a series of acquisitions and developments, and they're taking their expertise now to Latin America, clearly into Mexico, and they're also looking prospectively at other acquisition opportunities. But we'll dig into that a little bit later, and I'll run a few comments from Neil on what they're sort of looking at Leagold Mining and what they think of Los Filos. First, however, let's get into our macroeconomic roundup for the week. The US dollar was near 6-week lows to start the week after a dovish Fed tone during its meeting on March 14th and 15th. Scotiabank reports that gold's recent move has been characterized by significant short covering, followed by now fresh long interest. It should be noted that 9 Fed policymakers are set to make speeches this week, and the market will be looking for clues. On the copper side, our attention remains focused on potential supply disruptions, fueled by a series of socio-political situations worldwide. First, the labor strike at BHP Billiton's world-class Escondida copper mine in Chile's Atacama Desert recently extended to 39 days. The union has rejected BHP's latest offer after holding a series of meetings over the weekend where BHP offered a signing bonus, a wage readjustment based on consumer price index, and a new collective contract that should last for 42 months. The company agreed to keep in place a former agreement to treat new employees the same as long-time employees. The union has warned they are willing to be on strike for 3 months. Meanwhile, talks between Freeport McMoran and striking workers at its Cerro Verde copper mine in Peru broke down Thursday, with miners announcing their plan to start an indefinite stoppage beginning March 24th. That includes around 1,300 unionized miners who put down tools on March 10th. They are demanding better working conditions as well as a larger share of profits. Freeport, which attempted to evade the effects of the strike by using contract workers, said earlier this week that labor action would likely end next week as the government had declared it illegal. The union, however, has disputed the ruling. Scotiabank calculates we have seen around 370,000 tons of copper supply that has not materialized thus far this year. We are around 20% into 2017, and 35% of the disruption is due to the Escondida strike, while 12% is due to Freeport's ongoing problems in Indonesia with its Grasberg mine. Escondida lost another 25,000 tons, or 7% of that supply disruption, in January through a lack of productivity before the strike. Meanwhile, West Texas Intermediate crude oil dropped roughly 1.4% at the time of recording to $48.10 per barrel. Now, let's get cracking on that awesome Geology Corner. Again, we are being joined by Craig Hart from the UBC Mineral Deposit Research Unit. I hope you enjoy this awesome segment, I said awesome again, on Alaska Yukon geology. I'll see you after the break, and we'll introduce a few comments from Leagold Mining CEO, Neil Woodyard.
Always the best question.
Okay, cool. So here we are. Another episode of the Geology Corner.
Back at the pub again?
Yeah, we're back at Preston's downtown Vancouver.
Yeah.
We got a little bit of a special Geology Corner here today because I have my Google of Information, Mr. Craig Hart, Director of the Mineral Deposits Research Unit at UBC here in Vancouver.
That's right.
And he's here today, and we're going to be digging into all sorts of amazing things about gold and mineral deposits of the Yukon and Alaska.
And Alaska. So University of British Columbia, just so our listeners know. So maybe, Craig, you can start just with explaining what you guys do and a little bit about the program.
I'm the director of MDRU, the Mineral Deposit Research Unit, and we're based at the Department of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences at UBC. We're entirely industry supported, and so we're always working on industry-related projects. And that provides us that 1 foot downtown Vancouver and 1 foot at UBC, and it's a great place to be.
Cool, and the really amazing thing that you have to know about Craig Hart is that he was one of the finalists in Integra's Gold Rush Challenge last year, along with Sarah Jenkins, the GIS specialist expert. So
that's right, yeah, we were in the top 5, which was very exciting because I think we probably put far less work into it than anybody else, and we won the Audience Choice Award as well.
Yeah, you did. Everyone's favorite.
Yep, that was good.
Not surprised.
Yeah. What was it loosely? What was your sort of pitch that got you such a high standing there?
Well, we found a target that is within 250 meters of the underground workings at Lamaque that had been ignored for years and years and years, and people had walked over it, drove their snowmobiles over it, and it was just a blind target that had not been recognized because it was on an ancestral claim boundary.
Oh,
okay.
And so people didn't want to go near the claim boundary for fear of adding value to their neighbors, and when airborne surveys were flown, they wouldn't fly over the... So when we looked at the older data that existed before that claim boundary was there, we could see the target was clear and just needed some attention.
So pretty old-fashioned geo-hunting skills, nothing fancy.
No,
no augmented reality.
That's it.
Magic wands, water sticks.
A contest that's set up with all that innovation and everything, we just used very simple brute force geological approaches.
Think about it a little bit of a different way, and sometimes you can...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, if there's one person out there that knows his geology, it's definitely Craig, and I know that he's been kind of, like I said, my go-to expert for everything to do with the Western Cordillera here, so spanning from British Columbia through the Yukon up to Alaska. And he's been spending years devoted to figuring out where explorers can go to find more. And recently we've seen a huge surge of interest with major mining companies flocking in to Yukon specifically, looking at gold juniors We had Newmont come in with $35 million into Gold Strike. And then we had, of course, Triumph. Gold just recently got a big plug from Goldcorp. And the list goes on and on, I think. Anyway, so hundreds of millions of dollars are going into juniors up there. And I thought maybe I'd talk to Craig a little bit about why he feels the Yukon is gaining such attention again, and what kind of blue sky potential is still out there for explorers today. Craig?
Well, there's a lot wrapped up in that question.
It's good to catch all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So do we have an hour?
Yeah.
These things don't just happen by themselves, right? Is that there was a lot of ground preparation that's happened in the Yukon for sort of a decade before all this happened, right? The Yukon government continually puts money into the Yukon Geological Survey to try and make sure that there's lots of information and knowledge and fresh data and fresh maps that are happening. They support the prospectors up there. They have Yukon mining incentive programs that provides opportunities for low-level geological work, because a discovery is the tip of a pyramid, and there's all of this ground preparation that needs to get in there in order for these discoveries to be made. And so really I think the most important thing is that the Yukon has put their efforts and their investment into allowing these things to happen. So that's why guys like Sean Ryan, he's somebody who's smart enough who can take advantage of all of that new information, that new data. He's talking to the government guys, and he uses that to come up with his next great thing.
Data mining.
It's not just data mining, it's about integrating the information, right?
Everything.
Yeah, but it has to be there before you can do anything with it.
Well,
Exactly.
it's a full picture. And I think, Craig, one of the things that's really drawn everybody's attention is obviously white gold, and the white gold district, as they call it, and coffee, which was obviously purchased by Goldcorp, and that's drawn a lot of attention due to multi-million ounce potential, which is what majors look for. But if we rewind maybe a few years, Kinross bought Underworld Resources and completely missed, essentially whiffed, right? And I'm so kind of wondering why coffee, like sort of what went wrong the first time. Why did they miss on Underworld, whereas coffee's turned into sort of this more expansive project, and what you kind of think of white gold as a geological district?
Yep. Well, no, you're absolutely right. It was white gold that really sort of made that first thing happen, right? That was Underworld, and they did an excellent job of putting together as much of the exploration package as they could. And Kinross thought that they could be clever and come in there and add some more ounces, but it was a little bit more difficult than that. And sometimes you just don't know getting into this. And this is a part of the world where there's very little outcrop, right? It's like geology mapping is like a road map, but you really only have 5% of the information. How can you get from point A to point B?
Yeah.
And so in an area like that, there's lots that is hidden, and so you need to be cleverer than all your competitors in order to see where the extra value is, right? And so, Sean Ryan, again, the discoverer of white gold, it's because he doesn't care about the geology so much, is that he's looking at putting the best data sets together possible. And so he's looking at soil data, he's looking at geochemistry, and it doesn't matter if there's a rock there or not, he takes a sample and he keeps on going. And it was that same sort of approach then that led him to discover coffee.
And interestingly, I mean, just to segue off that, coffee, I know the geological model Kamenak used over the life of the gold discovery and adding those ounces changed. And more recently, they started classifying more as orogenic, whereas previously they'd used different models to describe the gold mineralization. And as someone who's obviously working out there as an academic geologist, I'm wondering how did you see that transformation of how they looked at that deposit as you followed it along?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back as well to white gold, right, where everybody was thinking about things as having this intrusion-related flavor. And so that was sort of the flavor of the day. That's what people were thinking about. But then we recognized from the age dates at white gold that it has to be related to crustal fluids, to metamorphism, and it didn't have an intrusion-related association. But coffee was partly contained within a 100-million-year-old intrusion. So we knew that it was at least 50 million years younger than white gold. So it represented an entirely different mineralizing event. And so that sort of set the stage again for us to reconsider that question. Is this related to one of the intrusions over there that's specially enriched in gold, or is this related again to some other crustal fluid that we don't recognize very well? So it sets up that, and you're right, how the what model you think works best influences how you make decisions. And so people will say, I never use a model. Well, that means you're never making a decision, because we all need to create or fabricate a framework around which we make decisions. And so this has been the ongoing issue at coffee. But regardless, they knew the type of ore well enough that they were continually being successful. And the fact that it was deeply oxidized was a thing that really sort of push the deposit over the top in terms of attracting a major like Goldcorp.
Yeah.
So what does the White Gold District look to you now? What kind of potential is left there?
I think it exists, right? There's still good potential in that area. We've done a very good job within our group and the government mappers in the Yukon of understanding the geological picture up there. So now we have a better framework than we ever had before. And the QV deposit that Comstock have been working on is almost a carbon copy of white gold. So now we have two places that are giving us the same information, so the model is even stronger. And so again, because there's so poor outcrop up there, is that the opportunity to find things like this still exists. It's not going to be easy, but we know what we're looking for.
I think that it was really interesting that you guys were able to differentiate the two ages between the mineralizing events at white gold and at coffee. And the reason why, of course, is because those two ages, as I understand it, correlate to two big massive tectonic events that occurred. I guess 150 million years ago is when Stikenia, that volcanic arc that hosts all of the porphyry deposits, docked onto the margin of ancestral North America. And that drove a lot of fluids into, I guess, the White Gold District, and also in the Barkerville District here in British Columbia. And then, of course, 100 million years ago-ish, the gold at Kaminak was introduced when we had another volcanic terrain dock onto ancestral North America. And so, for me, it seems like, we have all this potential in the Yukon, but that tectonic event affected the entire margin of British Columbia, Yukon, and into Alaska. So, I mean, are there other Klondike goldfields kicking around in BC and Alaska, and the same thing with coffee? Like, are there other types like that out there?
There definitely are, right? Yeah, and we know that when you get into Alaska, there's all those big placer districts. The Fairbanks district probably has 8 to 10 million ounces just in placer, and so we know that those types of mineral deposits that are formed from orogenic crustal fluids are out there in these metamorphic terrains.
So are you seeing a lot of renewed interest in people wanting to get in on this project in Alaska?
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting lots of interest in everything we've been doing in Yukon and Alaska. Companies want in, they want to know about what's going on in the project, and we'd love to help them out, and we can sometimes, but other times we're beholden to the companies that have given us the money to be there. So because they've given us that money, they get the information first, and they can use it. That's their competitive advantage. And at some point, though, this will be made public.
It's like a patent on information. So when will that be lifted? When will everyone have access to all the good things you're discovering out there?
So we will deliver the final package to the companies in May.
Okay.
And the clock starts ticking at that point. And some things will become available after 6 months and other things after a year.
Have they been kept up to date, by the way, on what some of your findings leading up to the point?
Absolutely. We've got technical meetings at least once, sometimes twice a year, to make sure that they're totally up on what our new information is all about.
Cool.
Now,
I'm really excited.
Before we wrap up, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
And this just occurred to me whilst listening to you guys talk. Is that you're saying now Fort Knox might be orogenic as well, and mistaken as an intrusion related?
Pogo.
Sorry, Pogo.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, is there something specific that would cause the two deposits like coffee and like Pogo to be mistaken for the same thing when there's something else? Like, is there something that led people down that path?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that they're both in intrusive rocks.
Okay.
And so geologists in particular have this immediate attraction to those red blobs on geological maps.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Right? The red blobs are always where you're going to find the gold. And so when you find gold in a red blob, we say, okay, that's got to have an intrusion association, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes that association really is genetic. Mm-hmm. But other times it's just there because that red blob of rock is very brittle and it fractures really well. And rocks that fracture well are the best places for those orogenic crustal fluids to go into.
Now, when you say genetic, you're gonna again. I'm the financial sort of proxy for the listener here, who's listening to the podcast. Well, maybe you could get a little more color just on what that means exactly, the differentiation there.
Yeah, it's just what the original source of the fluids were.
Okay.
Right, and so we know that granites, as they are now, they're tombstones. Yeah. But at one point they were magma, they were mush, right? They were melt, they were 1,000 degrees. Yeah. But as they cool down, they will effervesce fluids, much like bubbles in a beer glass, right? You'll get these bubbles of fluid coming up, and those fluids will have gold and copper associated with them. And when they come up, and to the upper part of the crust, they can go into cracks too. So that's an intrusion-related type ore system.
And red blobs. When you say red blobs.
Yeah, it's because on every geology map, the geologists always color the granites red.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they associate with intrusives or intrusion-related events.
Exactly.
It's the language of geology and colors.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to do on the Northern Miner podcast is lift the veil, as they say.
Well, most geologists have a part of their life when they spend a lot of time with pencil crayons. And so everyone will know Prismacolor 917 or something like that.
That is so true. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Craig. Absolutely a pleasure always talking to you, and glad that you got on the podcast, and I hope you can get down and hang out with us more for these.
Oh, it's my pleasure. If you're going to buy rounds, I'll show up.
Oh, easy. Sounds good. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and catch you next week. This is Lesley Stokes with the Northern Miner.
And welcome back to studio. I would like to thank Craig Hart once again from UBC's MDRU for joining us. That was a great little segment to cover some of the work they're doing up north there in terms of providing a little bit of a better understanding for explorers in the Yukon and Alaska to hopefully find more of those coffee-like deposits. So it was great once again. Thanks so much, Craig. We'll hope to have some more guests from the MDRU, have Craig back every so often to get an update on what they're doing, because academic geology is awesome. And it's fun to get them in and talk a little bit about what's going on in terms of mapping geological districts with broader strokes. So once again, that was Craig Hart from UBC's MDRU. And now I'm going to run about 2.5 minutes, I think, of audio from Neil Woodyer, who is the CEO of Leagold Mining on the venture. That is LMC is the ticker symbol. And the team from Leagold was formerly with Endeavour Mining, which grew over the past, let's say, 5 to 7 years into one of West Africa's leading intermediate gold miners. And Leagold was actually emerged in mid-2016 as essentially a shell. Neil Woodyer was the CEO, and he holds a 20.4% equity stake, while Frank Justra, financier, maintains an 11.5% equity interest. So what they will be doing is picking up Goldcorp's Los Filos mine, which lies about 230 kilometers due south of Mexico City. They will be paying around $350 million in cash and shares. And that will include around $279 million U.S. in cash and U.S. $71 million in shares. This is going to result in Goldcorp holding roughly a 22% pro rata interest in the company. So one to watch here. And I'm just going to run a little audio from Neil on the acquisition and the due diligence process on Los Filos and sort of what the company envisions over the short term, or I should say probably midterm. Leagold recently arranged a U.S. $150 million senior secured loan facility from a fund managed by Orion Resource Partners. The company also closed a $175 million equity offering, so they are well cashed up to close the deal and move ahead. They are looking at expediting development of a new underground opportunity at the El Bermejal deposit, and hopefully ramping up production at Los Filos. And Neil will dig into that a little bit during his comments. So I will run these, and I will be back after the break, and we'll wrap up our anniversary edition.
When you look at this, we've basically been through this experience before, the team has, but in West Africa, building and buying and creating an intermediate. And when you look elsewhere to do it, Latin America is the obvious place. First of all, the size of the mining industry, the opportunities in Latin America are much bigger. Geographic diversification. Also, a number of seniors who may well be disposing of properties, and a number of junior or smaller companies that may be struggling one way or another that could do with some help or some amalgamation or something like that. So I think a lot of opportunity. And when we look back as to what we did in West Africa, it's a bigger market. Hopefully the market is better now than it was then, both in terms of gold price, financing, and everything else. So hopefully it's a better situation all around than the one we lived through for 5 or 6 years before. Well, for us, it's a large asset to acquire for a single asset company. Yeah. It's been a big mine, well run for many years by a senior mining company. Therefore, it has all those attributes to it of a well-run operation. It's small now compared to other assets. The fact that it gets more complicated because the development step is a second underground mine makes it less attractive to them than some of their larger, I hate to say more straightforward, but some of their larger assets, and therefore that's why they were shedding it. Plus, they could see the benefit of Los Filos growing, but they're going to retain something like a 25% share in Leagold, so that they all get that upside benefit as well as the company develops the mine. Well, I think the more people are looking, it's very much market driven in terms of timing in the market, where the equity market is, where the debt market is, and all the rest of it. But yes, there are definitely other people looking. There was competition for this asset. Other people went through the same process. There are a number of other seniors who may well be shedding. So we think at the appropriate time for us, after the next stage we've developed this, we'll look at the market again. When we were looking now, Doug has a fantastic portfolio of opportunities aware of, and went down and looked at a couple of assets, and this Los Filos came up, and it was certainly in our top 5. And we were lucky at the timing. So we just sort of dropped everything and went for it, because for us it's such a good mine. It's over 200,000 ounces a year, and this last period it's just sort of by the 850 operating cost, all in sustaining. So it puts it about the middle of the cost curve, and we can see it through the expansion going up to over 300 at less than 700. So it's a great asset for us to get our hands on.
And welcome back. And so that's a little interesting emerging story with Leagold Mining. We'll keep our eye on that as they close the deal and move ahead with their plans at Los Filos. I would like to thank CEO Neil Woodyer for sitting down. If you're interested in the longer form article on Leagold, please do surf by northernminer.com and check it out. And as always, please do consider subscribing. As I always say, it is a screaming bargain. So do hop over to the website, hit that subscribe button, and check out the details. And as always, please do like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and check out our YouTube channel. And do rate this podcast on iTunes, because that helps us out a ton. And while we're on the subject, just a quick update on our Canadian Mining Symposium, which is happening at Canada House in London on May 9th. We've had a few, as we mentioned, exciting speakers hop on board. Last week, we announced that David Garofalo of Goldcorp and Kelvin Dushinsky of Barrick Gold will be on the speaking docket, alongside Lucas Lundin and Robert Friedland. So a nice stable of speakers shaping up for what should be an absolutely landmark event, celebrating Canada's 150-year anniversary. So we're really excited about that. If you're interested in our Canadian Mining Symposium, please do surf by the website, check out the details. I believe some sponsorships are still available, and we are hoping to do a special edition of the podcast overseas there. So hopefully we'll get some special guests on and have a really good episode live from our Canadian Mining Symposium in May. But that pretty much wraps up our show for the week. This has been Matthew Kiva with the Northern Miner, and happy 1-year anniversary, and thanks so much for listening.